After playing a week of Empulse, it's time to make a wrap-up video to talk about my experience and where I'm at with this game. As for the title of this video, let me make this clear, this was always the plan. I enjoyed playing Empulse, and I'm glad we got an arcade shooter that encourages movement and has a high skill ceiling. However, a movement shooter isn't really something I plan on playing as my main game. The only thing not planned about this video is whether or not I'm going to buy the game in early access, which we'll get to after revisiting the points I made for my first impressions video. I was mostly positive with my first impressions, but as the floodgates opened up and everyone got in, there's a few things that didn't end up playing very well. People's playstyles were drastically different from the close test I got into, and it kind of made the game less fun for me over time. While we dig into that, and as I go back and forth between my first impressions video and this video, consider supporting the channel and sharing this video around. Before I can even start revisiting the topics from my first impressions video, I also need to add a new one, which is the pace of the matches I got into. First off, 6v6 feels way too chaotic for this game. Again, something I've been saying since my first impressions video is that the map sizes are too small. And not only that, but teammates are constantly on top of each other, so you never can actually get into a one-on-one gunfight. There's always 2 or 3 enemies next to each other at any given time. Even on the occasion where I did get into a one-on-one gunfight, every single one of them turned into a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-1, or 2 random enemies will show up right afterwards for the cleanup kill. And because of how long the time to kill is, which is a good thing, it does make it so you're not going to win your 2-on-1s or your 3-on-1s. And because every enemy is next to each other, it also feels impossible to get in and out of a gunfight. Over time, this just got very frustrating because I just can't play the game because the moment I saw an enemy, I just had to run because it wasn't just one enemy, it was 2 or 3 of them within line of sight, and I can't fight that. I just have to keep running, turn around, try to get a kill on the run, and then just keep sweeping back and forth until I die or they died, whichever came first, and usually I ended up dying after getting 1 kill. One thing that I can say though is that in the last couple of days, we did get a 4v4 playlist, which was a lot more fun when my teammates weren't AFK. But at least in the 4v4 playlist, I didn't have to worry about getting into 2v1 or 3v1 gunfights anywhere near as often. So at least I can have fun winning my 1-on-1 gunfights without being killed instantly. And so I may not be able to win any games, but at least I can have fun playing the game and treat it like a TDM. And I know some people are going to complain about that, like why am I not playing the objective if I'm just getting kills? Well, it's because my teammates aren't getting kills and they also aren't playing the objective. So if I go and play the objective, I can't get kills, which means I'm going to die the moment I get anywhere close to it. So it's either play the objective and die instantly, or just play off angles, play at a distance, get my kills and just treat it like a TDM, and at least have fun doing that instead of just running into a meat grinder. And it's not to say that I never won any games, but if I were to look at my stats, I'm fairly confident that I lost way more games than I won. So the last thing to say about this is that this game does need a permanent 4v4 or maybe a 5v5 unranked playlist, because on 6v6, it's always at least 2 players next to each other. In 4v4, you can at least get your 1-on-1 gunfight and run away a little more often than you can in a 6v6 playlist. And now to start revisiting the points from my first impressions video. First up, we're going to talk about the movement. First thing I want to say that I didn't really talk about because it didn't really seem like an issue is that it's very slow to build up your momentum when you first spawn in. This regularly isn't a problem as everyone just throws down orange paint. That's why everyone has been using the speed paint, because that gives you your movement boost so that you can slide and jump and get your momentum going. However, again, with small maps and the possibility of people spawning in front of you, the possibility of being spawn trapped, it is very easy to just die immediately right out of spawn because you just have no speed. Now in my first impressions video, when it came to the top speed of the characters, I said this. From what I remember, it does feel like the speed does even out eventually, so it's not like you can just continue to gain more and more and more speed. It feels like there is a top speed. I could be wrong on that, and there may be some exploits to break that system. But from what I'm playing, once you hit a certain speed, that's pretty much it, more or less. And it turns out that's not exactly right. You can actually continue to gain speed and build up momentum and be faster over time. But in order to do that, you have to constantly be wall jumping and sliding. So you would have to wall run on very low surfaces, jump off, go into a slide, and keep bunny hopping and jumping off walls in order to build up your momentum. And then you would use your grappling hook to round corners in order to keep up your speed. That's fine and all, but if you're not wall jumping or sliding, you do eventually decelerate. At least that's how it feels. and you also do have to slow down a little bit when you start to get into a gunfight. Otherwise, you just run right out of the room and you have to circle on back and try to get into that gunfight again. Another thing I said about my first impressions video was about the grappling hook not giving you a speed boost, which ended up being correct. You don't really get a speed boost when you're using the grappling hook, you just use it to round corners while maintaining your momentum. I do think there's something they can do to fix that or to give us different options, but I won't go into that just yet. Another thing that I will mention is that it seems like they are going to be nerfing the speed paint as well with the next build of this game when it goes into early access. So overall, I wasn't too far off with my first impressions movement. The only thing that I did get wrong was the top speed of the movement that you can build up to. But the only reason why I didn't notice that is because you really have to be on the ground 90% of the time in order to get that speed going. You can't really build up that much speed or momentum when you're up in the air. As for the grappling hooks, there are perks you can bring into the game in order to change how it works. However, I do think instead of doing that, we should just be able to change the type of grappling hook that we have. So we can have the classic grappling hook that we have now that just lets you keep your momentum around corners, but we can also have another one that has a shorter range, but it gives you a speed boost. This way, you can use it to actually gain momentum, especially when you're off the ground, and also use it as a way to escape from a gunfight. Because the kind of boost and movement you get out of a grappling hook is just too predictable, and it's not really worth using unless you are already at a high speed. So I would like to see us be able to swap out the grappling hook for one with a smaller range, but it will give you a speed boost once it hooks onto a surface. Now moving on, let's talk about gunplay, which is the biggest factor for me and a big reason why I'm a bit iffy on where I'm at with this game and whether I'm going to buy it or not. In my first impressions, I said this. Moving on to the gunplay, it is very rewarding. That being said, it is also a very simple gunplay system. There is no aiming down sights. There also does not seem to be a recoil system or a recoil pattern. Pretty much wherever your crosshair is where your bullets are going to land. There might be some variance, there might be some bloom here or there, but I didn't feel it. And I was using a full auto rifle, so just keep that in mind. So long as your crosshair is on the target, your bullets should be hitting that target. And that pretty much holds true. The game is very rewarding because you're shooting at moving targets, and because of that, the gunplay has to be very simple to pull off. So there are no recoil patterns, it's just recoil bloom. Like I said, the gunplay is okay, it's very basic, but the time to kill itself, how long it takes to get your kills, it feels like it's in a good spot with most of these weapons. However, since there is no ADS, and since there is no actual recoil pattern, every weapon just ends up feeling the same after a while. The only difference is that one's a burst fire, and one is a single fire, and the others are full auto, and that's about it. And everything else just comes down to damage range, which in a movement shooter doesn't really mean a whole lot. At the end, the Resonance DMR is my personal favorite out of the bunch, but I continue to use the full auto assault rifles because I prefer a full auto weapon over a DMR, and a DMR or a sniper rifle is fun, but it does get boring after a while just having to shoot one bullet at a time. For me and my own taste, the gunplay feels very basic, and it has to be by nature because of Empulse being a movement shooter. So I can't really enjoy how unique these weapons are because at the end of the day, they're not really unique. They're just there to fill the role, and you just either pick one to be a specialist with, or you pick like an assault rifle or maybe an SMG in order to be able to be good at just about any meaningful range when we're talking about a movement shooter. Moving on to mechs, there's not really much more that I have to add on to compared to what I said in my first impressions. The only thing I'm going to say about them here is that either your team uses them or your team completely ignores them even when the opponents start using mechs. And the mechs are powerful when they are ignored or when they are protected by the entire team. But otherwise, they are entirely useless and not really worth using. The mechs right now are just very basic, and either you enjoy playing as a mech or you don't. And if you have a team that just doesn't want to use a mech, then you can end up being at a disadvantage if they all ignore the enemy if they start using the mech as well. And so when the enemy can take control of both mechs at the same time, which does happen fairly often, the game just turns into a mess, and again it just becomes unfun because no one on my team wants to deal with the mechs. They just want to treat them like they don't exist, and then we just lose gunfights because there's always a mech around the corner just providing support, which again falls into the whole every gunfight turns into a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-1 situation. And next up, another very sore point for me, we have to go and talk about the maps again. And I'm just going to run down my bullet points very quickly. It's very difficult to break line of sight of enemies because of how open these maps are. Again, the maps kind of have to be open in order to support the movement, but because of how small these maps are, and sometimes how simple some of these maps layouts are, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to break a line of sight once the enemy sees you and they start running you down. And on the occasion when you do get into a one-on-one gunfight, there are many times where I have to slow down in order to win that gunfight, and it just goes back into what I said about movement, where it's very difficult to gain momentum and run away. So if you slow down and you win your gunfight, chances are you're going to die 1 second later because there's someone running around at Mach 5 and you're just now trying to get back to speed. And again, it's why a lot of people rely on speed paint, because that's the only way to gain speed if you're not able to slide or wall jump. And another pain point for the maps is that spawn trapping can definitely happen, or spawn killing can definitely happen. There are players that are spawning in front of enemies. Sometimes I spawn in front of enemies, sometimes the enemies spawn in front of me, and it's just a very incoherent mess. There's something with the spawn logic that has to change, but that spawn logic can be a lot easier to pull off if the maps are bigger, if there are more dead spaces here and there that no one really uses because they are still out of the way, and that gives players time to build up speed, get back into the middle of the map where the action is happening, and get into those gunfights. During this week, they did drop a new map, which was Refinery, which in my opinion is the best map by far, and it should be the smallest map in this game. However, even in Refinery, it is still possible to get spawn trapped or spawn killed on Capture the Flag or Capture the Mech style modes. As for what I think are the worst maps in this game, it comes down to Elevation and Harbor. Both maps are way too small and way too open. I personally like the look of Harbor, and I really wish I did enjoy that map, but pretty much anytime I was in the air, I died. Pretty much anytime I was on one side of the map, I died. Anytime I got to the middle, I died. Like, unless I was in the back area by all the containers where I could actually break line of sight, that was really the best place for me to fight and to enjoy the game, enjoy the map. Anywhere else on the map, I just didn't really have a way to get in and out of gunfights. It just felt way too open, way too chaotic. That being said, a lot of these issues are less relevant in the 4v4 playlist. So if we're not going to get larger maps, if these maps are not going to be redesigned to be larger, then again, we need a dedicated, unranked 4v4 playlist, because that's really where these maps begin to shine, and that's where the movement of this game begins to shine as well. Moving on, I'm not going to talk about the art direction. I think what I said in my first impressions is pretty much the same as I would say now. I'm not going to say anything else different. So let's move on to the next part, which is going to be the price update. Originally, we knew the game was going to be somewhere under $30, but we didn't really have a price point just yet. Now we know that the regular price for early access is going to be $20, but it's going to have a discount price of $15 when it first shows up. So if you're watching this video in time, you could grab this game for $15 before it goes up to the $20 price point. And now lastly, like I said at the very beginning of this video, the only thing that I didn't know what I was going to say at the end of this video is, will I buy this game? At the very beginning, with my first impressions, I was leaning a lot more towards, yes, I'm going to buy this game. But now, after playing the game for a week and going against enemies that were non-stop next to each other at every given moment, making every gunfight a 2v1, and the only time I can enjoy this game is a 4v4, I don't really know where I sit with buying this game. I'm leaning a lot more towards neutral to negative at this point, and possibly just playing sit and wait. We still don't have a roadmap. We still don't know what the early access is going to have. What we do know is that early access is going to have more content immediately at launch, at early access release, but we just don't know what that is. We don't know how much more content is missing, and we don't know where the balance of the game is going to be at that point. So I am releasing this video a bit earlier before we know what those specifics are. But if you are considering buying this game, or if you're waiting for this video for one reason or another to kind of guide you as to whether or not to buy it, I don't really know, because we don't know where this game is sitting right now in early access, and I don't know where the devs want to take this game, whether they're going to try and keep the 6v6, or they're going to try and bring it down to a 5v5 or 4v4 for the regular game modes, or if they're going to redesign their maps to be larger. We just don't know. There are just too many unknowns right now for me to really make a sound decision. I will say though that I do want to buy the game. I do want to support it, especially at the $15 sale price. And I already know that this is not a game that I'm going to be playing to play ranked in, or to play for hours on end every single day. So from that perspective, I can say that I'm willing to buy it, but only if we get a dedicated, unranked 4v4 playlist. And I've been seeing talks online about aim assist, whether it's overpowered, whether it's not overpowered. No one really seems to be on the same footing in one way or the other. So we'll just have to wait and see. This is not the conclusion that I want to give. I want to have a more sound conclusion, but right now I just don't really know. I have fun with the game, but a lot of the times I don't. And right now, the only time I can have fun is in 4v4. But when I play that, I just have to expect to lose my matches because the chances are the 3 teammates I have are not going to be playing the objective anyways. So then I would have to try and find people to play the game with, and I can't solo queue. So it's a mess. Like, if I were to enjoy this game, I would have to look into the community, team up with randoms, and play with them. And instead of just trying to solo queue, because it seems like every time I played the game, it seemed rare to have a stacked team on my side than it was for me to go against a stacked team. So those are my thoughts. I know it's a bit all over the place. Again, I'm very sorry. I wish I could be a little more direct on it, but I just can't. And so let me know what you guys think about Empulse. Did this week change your mind in one way or the other? Did you give it a chance at all? Do you think it's still going to die immediately after release? Let me know all that in the comments below. Like I said, I think it's fun. I think it's worth playing and giving it a shot. But I never saw this game as something that I could play every single day or put a ton of hours into every day. And I'm kind of sad by that. But I'm glad that it exists. I'm glad we got a movement shooter. I hope at some point in the near future, we get an arcade shooter that still has a little bit of movement, but has larger characters, has actual recoil patterns with ADS. That's what I'm looking for in an arena arcade shooter of today. And we just don't really have that right now outside of Call of Duty. So I'll be waiting for Modern Warfare 4, but I know aim assist is going to be tweaked on that too. So there's just no winning for me. I guess I have to pick up controller in the next like 3 months. And otherwise, I just have to die to aim assist every game. Until we know more information, until there's another game that I can actually cover, I am Mr. Rain, and I'll see you guys next time.